My name is Madison Clark, and from the corner office on the 24th floor, the city feels like mine. The glass walls glow with late afternoon light, casting gold across the polished wood of my desk. My silk blouse brushes softly against my skin as I lean back in my chair, one stiletto dangling from my foot. To anyone looking in, I am the picture of composure, an executive at the top of her game. But beneath that calm exterior, there's a secret only I carry. I wasn't supposed to be here. At least, not according to the people who once claimed to know me best. The muted buzz of my phone interrupts the silence. A new meeting request flashes on the screen. The name makes my heart jolt, the way an old scar aches before a storm. Richard Coleman. My father's old business partner. The same man who laughed when I showed him my diploma, dismissing my degree as a piece of paper that won't pay rent. For a moment, I just stare at his name, heat rising in my chest. The irony is sharp, almost bitter. He's on my calendar now, not as my superior, not even as my equal, but as someone who works for me. I inhale slowly, savoring the scent of fresh coffee from the mug at my desk, and let the reality sink in. The girl they once dismissed is gone. In her place stands a woman who owns the very ground they walk on. I was 22 the day everything inside me cracked. Graduation day should have felt like a beginning, but in my family's living room, cap and gown still clinging to me, it felt more like an ending. I stood proudly clutching my degree in business analytics from NYU, the paper still crisp, the ink fresh. My chest swelled with a mixture of pride and relief. Years of late-night study sessions, coffee-fueled mornings, and part-time jobs had led me here. I thought my family would finally see me. Instead, I was met with smirks. My father leaned back in his recliner, eyes fixed on the TV as if my future was background noise. "Madison," he said flatly, "that's just a piece of paper. You should have studied something practical. Nursing, teaching, something real. Analytics?" He chuckled, shaking his head. My mother's voice was softer, but no kinder. "Honey, companies don't hire girls like you for big roles. Maybe you should settle down, find stability. A husband with a steady job would make more sense." Each word hit like a pebble thrown at glass, small but relentless, until I felt myself splintering. I forced a smile, but my hands trembled around the diploma. The tears that threatened to spill were held back by sheer pride. I wouldn't let them see me break. Not today. Then came Richard Coleman, my father's longtime business associate, who had stopped by that afternoon. He eyed my degree like it was a joke. "You'll be calling me for a job in 6 months," he said with a laugh. "And even then, I doubt I'll have anything worth giving you." His words stung more than I cared to admit. That was the moment I realized I could stay here, shrinking myself until I fit their expectations, or I could walk away and prove them all wrong. As I slipped off my graduation cap, my grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. She had passed the year before, but her words lived inside me. "Madison, don't let anyone write your story. Hold the pen tight, baby girl, and write it yourself." That night, I tucked the diploma into a leather folder she had given me before she died. A plain, worn folder, but to me, it felt like armor. With it in my hands, I packed a small suitcase, left the house, and didn't look back. That was the day I chose independence. That was the day Madison Clark was born again. Starting over felt like stepping into an empty room with no lights on. I had 2 suitcases, $600 in my checking account, and a heart that burned with equal parts fear and determination. I rented a shoebox apartment in Brooklyn. The walls were thin, the radiator clanked like an old man coughing, and the air smelled faintly of fried onions from the deli downstairs. But it was mine. For the first time in my life, the silence belonged to me. My days blurred into long hours at a tiny cafe near Union Square, refilling cups of coffee for strangers while memorizing coding languages and data visualization tools on my laptop during breaks. By night, I'd come home to aching feet, peel off my apron, and keep studying. My friends were out celebrating post-grad freedom. I was wrestling with Excel formulas and SQL queries at 2 a.m. Doubt was a constant shadow. Some nights, I stared at the ceiling, wondering if my parents had been right. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe my degree really was just a piece of paper. But then I glanced at the worn leather folder on my desk, the one holding my diploma, the one my grandmother had given me. It whispered the same words every time. Hold the pen tight and write it yourself. That whisper kept me going. 6 months later, a turning point arrived. At the cafe, I struck up a conversation with a regular customer, a woman named Diane Matthews. She was sharp, mid-40s, always dressed in tailored blazers and heels that clicked confidence across the tile floor. One morning, she noticed the data charts on my laptop. "You made these?" she asked, eyebrows raised. I nodded nervously. "Just practice. Trying to keep my skills fresh." She studied me for a long moment, then handed me her card. "I'm the COO of a small but growing marketing firm. We need someone who thinks like this. Come see me." That single conversation cracked open a door I thought was sealed shut. At Diane's firm, I started as an entry-level analyst. I was the youngest in the room, the only woman on the data team, and often the one people overlooked. But Diane didn't. She pushed me hard, challenged me to back up every claim with facts, and never once let me shrink. The climb was brutal, long nights building models that crashed, weekends sacrificed to presentations, constant whispers that I was too young or too ambitious. Yet slowly, piece by piece, victory stacked. My first major client signed off on a campaign driven by my analysis. My first bonus check arrived, proof that my work had value. For the first time, I could pay my bills without panic. I kept my success quiet for my family. On social media, I posted simple things, sunsets, books I was reading, coffee cups. Never promotions, never wins. Let them think I was just figuring it out. The less they knew, the safer I felt. Within 5 years, I wasn't just working at Diane's firm. I was running my own. With her mentorship and eventual partnership, we built Clark and Matthews Consulting, a data-driven firm that grew faster than either of us had dreamed. By 30, I had clients across the country, contracts worth millions, and a team that trusted me. The girl they dismissed had become a woman with power. And still, I told no one back home. The day Richard Coleman walked into my office, the world seemed to fold back on itself. I'd been reviewing quarterly reports, sunlight flooding across my desk, when my assistant buzzed in. "Madison, there's a Mr. Coleman here to see you. Says he's scheduled for a strategy meeting." For a moment, my pulse stumbled. I hadn't heard that name in years, yet the sound of it carried me back instantly. Back to that living room where he'd smirked at my degree, his laughter echoing in my bones. "Send him in," I said, my voice smooth, practiced. The door opened, and there he was. Older now, with streaks of gray threading his once dark hair, but still carrying himself with the arrogance of a man who'd always believed he was untouchable. His eyes scanned the room first. The wide glass windows with views of the skyline, the abstract paintings on the walls, the shelves lined with books and awards. Every detail of this office had been chosen carefully, a reflection of the woman I had become. His gaze finally landed on me, sitting calmly behind the desk. "Madison Clark?" he asked, hesitation in his voice. "Yes," I replied, offering the faintest smile. "Please have a seat." He lowered himself into the leather chair opposite me, eyes narrowing. "You're the Madison Clark who runs Clark and Matthews Consulting?" "I am," I said simply. For a beat, silence stretched between us. I let it hang there, heavy and deliberate, until I saw the first flicker of recognition in his eyes. "You're the—" He stopped himself, shaking his head as if the memory was too absurd. "The girl with the analytics degree." "The same," I said, leaning forward slightly. "The one you told would be begging for a job from you in 6 months." His face flushed, but I didn't flinch. I let the weight of his own words hang in the air, finally coming home to roost. He cleared his throat, fumbling for dignity. "Well, life has its surprises. I didn't realize your firm was the one our company contracted for this project." "Our firm," I corrected, my tone sharp but measured. "And, to be clear, you're not here to evaluate me. You're here because your company hired mine. Which means I paused, savoring the moment. You work for me now. The silence that followed was delicious. I could see it in his face, the disbelief, the sting of pride crumbling. The man who once dismissed me now sat across from me, bound by the contracts his boss had signed with my company. I stood and walked slowly around the desk, heels clicking against the polished floor, until I stood beside him. Funny, isn't it? I said softly. The piece of paper you laughed at turned out to be the very foundation of this. I gestured around the office, the art, the awards, the empire I had built. His eyes flicked around the room, and for the first time in all the years I had known Richard Coleman, he had no words. But it wasn't just about him. My parents' disbelief, my family's silence, all of it seemed to stand in that room with us. They had dismissed me, underestimated me, ignored what I carried inside. And here was living proof of how wrong they had been. I straightened my shoulders, meeting his stunned gaze. Tell your boss, I said, that the girl you all overlooked is now the woman signing your checks. The taste of justice filled the air like something tangible. For the first time, I felt the full gravity of my journey. They had tried to bury me in doubt, but I had grown roots deep enough to break through concrete. And now they were standing in the garden I had built. Richard Coleman wasn't the only ghost from my past that week. Word travels fast in small towns, even when you're miles away in New York. Within days of that meeting, I got a call I never expected. My parents. They wanted to see me. For years, they hadn't bothered. Holidays passed with nothing more than a polite card, birthdays acknowledged with silence. But now, with Richard spreading the word about who I had become, suddenly my phone lit up with their names. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Part of me still longed for recognition, for some sliver of the love I had craved as a girl. When they arrived at my office, they looked smaller than I remembered. My father, once so imposing, seemed to shrink under the weight of the space, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the skyline, polished wood table gleaming, fresh flowers on the sideboard. My mother's eyes darted nervously over the artwork, the leather chairs, the subtle signs of success. This is impressive, my father murmured, though the words sounded like gravel in his throat. I folded my hands on the desk, steady and calm. It didn't build itself, I said evenly. They exchanged a glance, as if unsure how to begin. My mother cleared her throat. Madison, we were wrong. About your degree. About everything. We didn't think. Well, we never imagined you'd. Her voice trailed off, the weight of unfinished sentences filling the room. I let them sit in that discomfort for a moment before leaning forward. You didn't just doubt me. You dismissed me. You told me my dreams weren't real, that I should settle, that I wasn't enough. And now you want back in because success makes me worthy in your eyes? My father flinched. We only wanted what was best for you. No, I interrupted, my tone sharp but not cruel. You wanted what was comfortable for you. But comfort kills dreams. And I refused to let mine die. Silence hung heavy, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, I spoke again, softer this time. If you want a place in my life now, there are conditions. They both looked up, startled. First, I said, you will never belittle education again, mine or anyone else's. Words can break a person, and I won't allow you to use them as weapons anymore. My mother nodded quickly, shame flickering in her eyes. Second, you will stop hiding behind fear. Both of you gave up on your own dreams years ago, and you took that bitterness out on me. I won't accept it anymore. If you want to be in my life, you have to pursue something that lights you up, even now. It's not too late. My father shifted uncomfortably, but I held his gaze until he looked down. And third, I said firmly, respect isn't optional. If you can't treat me or anyone with dignity, then the door stays closed. Their faces told the story, shame, regret, and the faintest spark of realization. I leaned back, my voice calm, steady. This isn't revenge. It's boundaries. If you can live within them, there's a chance we can rebuild. If not, I've already proven I can thrive without you. The power in that moment wasn't loud. It was quiet, resolute, unshakable. For the first time, the balance had shifted entirely. I wasn't their daughter begging for approval anymore. I was Madison Clark, the woman who set the terms. Weeks passed after that confrontation, and something unexpected happened. My parents didn't disappear back into silence. Instead, small signs of change began to surface. My mother enrolled in an evening art class at the community center. She sent me a picture of her first canvas, a clumsy bouquet of flowers, but the joy in her smile was unmistakable. My father, stubborn as ever, took longer. But then he called one night to tell me he had started volunteering at the local library helping kids with math. For a man who once belittled learning, it was nothing short of remarkable. It didn't erase the years of pain, but it was a start. As for me, I found myself reflecting more often. On nights when the city lights sparkled outside my office windows, I would touch the worn leather folder that still sat on my desk. Inside was my degree, edges frayed from years of carrying it like a shield. To anyone else, it was just paper. But to me, it was proof that I had chosen my own story and refused to let anyone steal the pen. I thought of my grandmother often. Her voice still echoed in my heart. Hold the pen tight, baby girl, and write it yourself. She hadn't lived to see all of this, but somehow, I felt she knew. She had given me the strength to believe when no one else did. One Friday evening, as my team celebrated another milestone contract, I slipped into my office alone for a moment of quiet. The laughter from the other room drifted through the walls, warm and alive. I picked up the folder, pressed it against my chest, and closed my eyes. The girl who once stood trembling in her parents' living room was gone. In her place was a woman who had built something unshakable, not out of spite, but out of resilience. I opened my eyes, looking out at the skyline. The city didn't just feel like mine anymore, it was mine. Every late night, every sacrifice, every tear shed in silence had brought me here. And with a steady breath, I whispered the words that had carried me this far, the words that now tasted like triumph. They ignored my degree, but now I employ their boss. Not as revenge, not as cruelty, but as justice, and as proof that no one, ever again, would write my story for me.